You're listening to Errol Parker and Clancy Overall, editors of the Betoota Advocate on Desert Rock FM. Welcome back to the Betoota Advocate radio show. You're joined by myself, Clancy Overall. This week, Errol Parker, editor-at-large, is up chasing a news story up in Longreach. They just had the big fundraiser concert out there in Dirranbandy. Big Red Bash on at Birdsville. We've had a bit going on in the southwest of Queensland. And today, we've been on a roll of late on the Betoota Advocate radio show, interviewing a whole lot of different people from the music industry. Today, we're actually interviewing a bloke who, if I've done my research correctly, got his start down there in the River City. That, by my standards, makes him a proud Queenslander, makes him a Queensland export. Thank you for joining us today, Glenn Wheatley.
Clancy, very good to be here. Yes, and I am a Queensland import in Melbourne now, in Cremorne, Melbourne.
So can you tell us a little bit? I mean, you are a musician, a businessman, a talent manager. As we were just talking about off the microphone before, for a time there you were the face of Telstra. You've worked in all sides of the stage, I guess. You've been on stage, you've been out the back.
I guess that's right, mate. I mean, I left Brisbane in a little blues band called Bay City Union, and in that band we had Matt Taylor singing lead and Phil Manning on guitar and myself on bass. We were an 18-year-old blues band, if you can believe that. I mean, as people who hadn't suffered in life and hadn't suffered enough, but we were trying to be a blues band. And we did okay, but we eventually parted ways here in Melbourne, and I eventually joined the Masters Apprentices. So I went from blues band to pop star overnight, and I loved the transition.
Now, can you just tell me a little bit about the blues influence? There was a lot of blues influence on your generation. Is that partly because there were so many young fellows whose parents had come, as 10-pound poms, and for whatever reason, blues were a part of their life?
Well, I came from the western suburbs of Brisbane, and we were absolutely working class family. So did that qualify me to be in a blues band? It probably gave me a good heads up, to think, I've got some problems and let's put it in a blues band. But no, I guess there was a bit of an era. I came out of the Lobby Lloyd Purple Hearts era in Brisbane, and Lobby, I have to give credit, gave me my big break in the music business. He was the one that asked me to come along as believe it or not, a 17-year-old to play rhythm guitar for the Purple Hearts, the biggest band in Brisbane at the time. And I could not believe my luck. I mean, I turned up on that first night. Lobby put a 12-string Rickenbacker around me, plugged me into a Vox AC30. Well, I could have gone to heaven. That was unbelievable. And here was Lobby giving me a big chance to play with the big boys. And I was a kid, but, it was my first big break, and I'll never forget Lobby for giving me that opportunity. It was wonderful.
As far as your career in music goes, playing music was made up at least 50% of it, you'd say, in terms of the timeline. You're on stage for a fair whack before you even got into management and talent management and promoting. What was the scenario like? The Glenn Wheatley we know today is, the man responsible for Farnham's comeback tours and the first person to kind of cross into the dark side and be able to speak on behalf of the Australian musician when it comes to, their management. What were you living like? Because obviously your experience as a musician informed your career in talent management. How were you living? Were people living in poverty? Were you living on couches in St Kilda?
Well, look, I was when we first came down. There's no doubt about that. We were head to toe in single beds, Bay City Union, trying to flap together in Beaconsfield Parade, St Kilda, and in a little hostel type place. It was hand to mouth. There's no doubt about it. We lived by, pinching bottles of milk off people's porches and bread from the Bella Carver bakery, and it was survival of the fittest in those days. But the Masters became a little bit easier, but there were still issues as to with management that I had at the time, which is why I ended up becoming not only the bass player for the Masters, but also the manager, because I had to sack our manager. I mean, he was not doing a very good job. It turns out he was the same manager for John Farnham, and that's where I met John. We were flatmates together in St Kilda and managed by the same guy. But it all happened to be, oddly enough, in Brisbane, my hometown, and here I was playing at the Festival Hall in Brisbane with the Masters Apprentices, sold out. And in the audience was my mother, proud as punch to see the old man or his son up on stage. But unfortunately, the kids were going crazy. They were hysterical. They all stormed the stage and ripped all my clothes off, ripped all Jim Key's clothes off. And the police came and closed us down because they thought we were indecently exposed. And but the crowd just went crazy. And they shut the show down. And then I remember walking backstage, stepping over all these fainted, dead bodies of young girls that were just passed out and fainted. And they're all lying on the floor. I had to step over them. And all I could remember was the promoter running around going, "We had a bigger crowd than the Beatles." And I thought, hang on, a bigger crowd than the Beatles. And I got back that night to Lennon's Hotel. I had to go through the foyer with carrying my guitar just dressed in jocks because I had no clothes. They were all ripped off me. And I got into my room. I'm still sweating from the show. My ears are ringing because the noise from the kids was so loud. And all I could think about was a bigger crowd than the Beatles. And I started to put two and two together. I thought, hang on, we just got paid the princely sum of $200, but we had to fly ourselves up. I basically, by the time we divided that by four, that's $50. I lost $70 in my pink velvet suit that was ripped off me. So I'd lost money that night, and I'm the headline attraction. And I thought, what's wrong with this picture? And the penny dropped for me that night. And I started to think, this is ridiculous. Our manager has sold us up here for $200 and we're the headline attraction. The promoter's running around going, "You bloody beauty." Yeah. He's made a fortune and with a sold out show. So that night I devised what we call the door deal. I started to think, hang on, first of all, rule number one, the manager's got to go. Two, I'm going to take over. And three, I'm going to devise. There's no such thing as a set fee for the Masters Apprentices anymore. I want a percentage of the gate. I want a percentage of the door. And the more we draw, the more we should earn. That made sense to me. I thought it made perfect sense. And so from there on in, we were going up for door deals. We didn't have a set fee. And my life changed. I mean, I got into the management side of the business and basically I've been in it ever since.
So I'll just go back to that event there at what it's now known as Fortitude Hall, Festival Hall it was called back then, in the middle of Fortitude Valley.
Yep.
You were saying that they had a bigger crowd than the Beatles, around 7,000 people jammed into that venue, $5 a ticket. Yep. So by today's standards, and I've done the inflation model here, that was close to half $500,000 in today's money.
And the promoter was rolling in it.
I mean, was there tell me about the how you were received in this industry when you started rocking the boat, and obviously ruining a very good thing they had going for them.
Well, I mean, I did the same thing for John Farnham because he had the same manager, and I said to John at the time, I said, "You're going to have to sack your manager too," because I know John was going up for a flat fee. And John was all over the place. He was Johnny Farnham then. He was Sadie the cleaning lady. He was the king. He was doing the shopping centres. He was doing working 3 different states in a day. Yeah. And he's going up for a flat fee. So I said the same thing to him. You've got to be commensurate to your drawing power, mate, as to what your fee should be. It should not be a fixed number. It depends on how many people are there and what the costs are for the promoter, and give the promoter a fair whack, but don't let him take the gate. We should be getting the majority of the gate. And that was, I think John, unfortunately for his manager, he sacked him too. So there was certainly change going in the industry. I mean, we'd come from a cottage industry to actually getting into serious business now. So, and so things had to change with the times, and I think I had a little bit to do with it.
Well, you also played a major role in getting the FM radio kind of a bandwidth, I guess, off the ground.
Mate, I had a lot to do with that. I mean, FM radio, we broke Little River. I broke Little River Band in America on FM radio. And I'm coming home to Australia, still listening to 2SM, 3XY,
yep.
and it's all AM radio. And I think, well, why don't we have FM radio in Australia? So I spent the next 2 years of my life walking Parliament House carpet threadbare, talking to any politician, any Department of Communications, anybody who wanted to hear me, try and convince them that we needed to have FM radio in Australia. The problem we had was 50 years ago, the then government gave the FM band away to essential services, that is fire, police and ambulance.
Right.
And my job was to try and convince them, you got to take these guys, put the essential services up on UHF where they belong, free up the FM band, and we got a whole new business. And it took me 2 years, but I was able to convince them. And then the government said, we've worked out how to do it all now. Thank you very much. Now the tender's going to go out, and I actually won the Melbourne tender for the first commercial FM license in Australia. And the race was on because they'd also given the license out in Sydney, Adelaide, Brisbane, and Perth, and Melbourne. So the race was on. I wanted to be the first to go to air. I called my station Eon FM, and we were by hell and over high water. I wanted to be the first. And we were. We got to air on July 7th, 1980, and we were the first commercial FM as Eon FM to go to air. I mean, we had the studio, believe it or not, was basically made of egg cartons and as soundproofing, held up by chicken wire, held up by soldering iron, still still soldering, and alligator clips. That's all I remember is alligator clips that put this station to air. But we got to air in the most incredible circumstances. And the first song we played was New Kid in Town, and we launched commercial FM radio in Australia.
Did you find yourself from going, from musician to disruptor to the promotions industry and management industry, and then you find yourself in a position where you're now running Eon Radio? How did it feel to kind of transition into power broker status?
Well, mate, it got bigger than that. I mean, from Eon FM, I ended up buying 2 Triple M in Sydney, and then combined Eon. I then changed Eon's name to Triple M. I bought FM 104 of Christopher's Case in Brisbane. I turned that into Triple M. I bought Adelaide station that I turned into Triple M. I was actually built the start of what is now famously the Triple M network. Yeah. So, I mean, that was heady stuff. That was the 80s. I mean, this was the transition that I had to go through. I went from a mom and pop store as little Wheatley Communications, borrowing literally hundreds of millions of dollars, and it was easy in those days. It was the 80s. What can I say? The money was around. Just had to pay for it. It was 18% interest in those days, but the money was there. The money was there to buy these acquisitions, and I did. But my big mistake was I ended up floating on the stock exchange as a public company, and I lost control, and Austereo eventually came in and bought me out, and I lost my little Triple M's, broke my heart, but it was, again, a sign of the times. It was just the way the 80s were. It was big money, big interest rates, but lots of money, and these deals were, I proved that they were achievable because, I mean, I didn't come from a business background at all. I came from a musical background, and my learning curve in those days was extraordinary, but it had to be because all of a sudden, particularly when I became a public company, I listed on the stock exchange, oh my lordy lord, you got annual general meetings, you got shareholders, you got thousands of shareholders. So all of a sudden my life became deadly serious, you know,
And were you surrounded by, obviously you go from, I guess, being surrounded by rock stars who, I guess, are some of the greatest yes men you'll have around you. But what was it like dealing with, the suck-ups of big business who could actually see that you were onto something?
Well, I did get accepted by big business. There's no doubt about it. I mean, all of a sudden they had to take this little pop star seriously because I was dealing with the biggest radio network in the country. And I was dealing at that time with 2 Triple M, the most powerful station in the country. I had Doug Mulray, doing breakfast, and it became legendary, Doug, and the station became legendary. And so did my old little Eon FM, now called Triple M in Melbourne. It was serious business, and FM was the growth business, of course, at that time. I mean, it took about 5 years before we overtook AM radio as preferred music stations. Why? Because we were in stereo, and it was a high-quality broadcast signal and much better than low-band AM radio. So it was all of a sudden, I mean, the Titans, the 2SMs of the world were being all of a sudden taken over by the Triple M's. And FM had finally come of age. And yes, business did have to put their hand up and accept us. And in the early days, we couldn't even join the federation of what was called the Federation of Radio Broadcasters in those days. They didn't allow the FM station owners to become members. It was an AM-dominated society. But in the end, they had to let us in because we were the dominant players.
Yeah, so was there a while there where you were struggling to get anyone to do your ratings?
Yes. I mean, that was the problem. I mean, we couldn't even get accepted for our ratings. It took about 3 years before we got into the rating system. And lo and behold, it took us about 5 years before I got Eon FM to number 1. Yeah. And that, all of a sudden, the new kids had really arrived. I mean, we were taking AM out at that particular point as far as music is concerned. I mean, AM is still very acceptable. I mean, 2GB is, but they're essentially talk stations because it's hard to put music on an AM station and compete with FM. Yeah. That's the problem.
Yeah, unless it's classical, of course. That's the last thing remaining on AM. And from there, how would you fill out your day? Was it all radio, or were you still working with your Farnhams and your artists? My life was insane. Not only was I doing all those Triple M's around the country, I was looking after Australian Call, Little River Band, John Farnham, Mondo Rock, Ross Wilson, Pseudo Echo, Real Life. My God, are you serious, Glenn? I mean, I was all over the place. I mean, my life had gone from. I'd taken on too much. There's no doubt about it. And then, of course, I decided to get into sport management. So I'm now managing golfers like Ian Baker Finch, watching him, being with him when he wins the British Open. Wayne Grady, golfer, when he wins the PGA in America. Peter Brock, when he's winning Bathurst. I manage all these people as well. Are you serious, Glenn Wheatley? Jesus Christ. I mean, seriously, it was extraordinary. And my life was a merry-go-round. I had to sort of take a little bit of stock of myself because hubris had taken over my life. I mean, all I wanted to do was build this giant empire of radio and management and do everything. And it was too much. And had I not taken stock, I have to say, I mean, I would not have been able to keep my marriage together and things like that were so important. I mean, I had young children that I'd never seen. Mm-hmm. I was never there. I wasn't even there for the christenings. I was either at the British Open or I was with Little River Band in Boise, Idaho, or Australian Call at the Currumbin Beach Club. Yep. You know, I mean, what the? So I actually took a bit of a fall, and I needed to. I needed the correction. I was doing too much, and as I said, hubris just got in my way, and I was not a nice person. Mm-hmm. I realised that my life was just. I was just possessed. Were you living hard as well, or was that one of your skill sets that you actually knew when to leave the after party? I was always the first to arrive and the first to leave at the after party. There's no doubt about that. I couldn't burn those candles at both ends. So I was always the first to leave the parties. There's no doubt about that. But I mean, look, I drank too much. Mm-hmm. I smoked too much. Everything was in excess. Yeah. And something had to give, and it did, thankfully, because I'm still the most happily married man I know, and the kids
still think I'm the king.
Yeah, so, well, that was a lot of egos to manage as well as managing your home life. That's another thing I want to kind of talk about, because that does affect. I guess that would affect you in a job to manage excellence. And they talk a lot about the madness of excellence, and it sounds like, Michael Jordan and Donald Bradman wouldn't have been the type of blokes you'd want to take fishing.
No.
What did you find? And there's a crossover between sport and music in that regard, where the best of the best are quite often possessed. How do you manage some of those personalities?
Little River Band, for example, was like managing World War III. I mean, that was insane. The egos that those 6 members had, I mean, all fighting to get their own songs onto the album, and it was insane, that looking after that band. Australian Call, I mean, James Rain is the nicest guy in the world these days, but in those days, James Rain was a pillock. I mean, he was impossible to deal with Australian Call. And then you go the other extreme. You got the Peter Box of people just go. He was a flawed genius.
Yeah.
I mean, he was weird, but he was a genius, and he was the best at what he did. Inspiring, I mean, I loved. You sort of put up with the insanity because of the creativity and the geniusness of all of these people. They're all talented in their own right, whatever in their vocations, but. Some of them, they're tricky.
and your job is putting out fires, I guess, everywhere.
Everywhere, mate. You become father confessor. I spent so much time, particularly with LRD. I mean, the number of times that Glenn Shorrock resigned, the number of times that B. Birtles resigned, the number of times that Graham Goble resigned. And you're sitting there and going, listen, you guys, you're at the peak of your life here. I mean, particularly Little River Band. We sold 22 million albums with LRB, essentially in America. And here they are. I'm standing in between them like it's World War III every night. And I guess it's because we're in each other's pockets. You're traveling all day. In those days, in those buses, that are just full of dormitory beds, and after you finish your show, you get on the bus and you drive another 300 miles to the next city. And then you get it there at some ungodly hour of the morning. We shower at the venue. We didn't even have hotel rooms in those days. We just lived on the bus. I mean, and that was before there was mobile phones, so there's no calling home. There's no, it was tough, mate. It was, and we were pioneering our way across America, but tearing each other apart doing it.
Well, you managed to maintain, obviously, part of your job is maintaining these relationships, but you are quite, in the mainstream, you're associated with, managing Farnham with his comeback album. Were you the one behind all of the different comeback tours? This is the last time?
Well, let me correct that. There was only one comeback tour, and that was the last time. No, the comeback tour was the one after the last time tour. But unfortunately, the last time tour started out as being the last time. It was a regional tour. I had 2 big tops that were going out. You know what? 4 polar big tops that held 4,000 people, these giant tents. And I had 2 of them piggybacking across Australia. While we're playing in one, the other one's going ahead to the next city and being set up, waiting for us to get into the next city. And it was the last time for Karratha, for Geraldton, for Kalgoorlie. Yeah. Yes, we were saying goodbye. I mean, no one could afford. Farnham was the only one that could do the business in those sort of places to pay for this monumental cost of running 2 big tops across the country. But unfortunately, the last time ended up filtering into the cap cities, and that was the rock that I perished on, because I've had to live it down ever since. We still call the last time at Rod Laver Arena. You idiot, Glenn. What was I thinking? I mean, I still had the neon sign of the last time stuck up in my study at home here in Cremorne as a constant reminder, Glenn, never say never again. Don't, the last time I came back to Hornets, because everyone said, oh, he's coming back, Dame Nellie Melba, he just never, he's coming back again. No, we never went away is the problem. We never went away from the cap cities. but everybody thinks we did, and that's why every time we did not do, we just copped it.
The last time was
again.
the last time you were doing a regional tour like that. And then, and then you accidentally did a few last time shows in major cities.
In the cap cities.
Farnham had,
and we've never lived it down.
He had full intention of visiting again.
Oh yeah, there's no way we're going. Here we are selling out Rod Laver arenas. Like, mate, we've done. Can you believe we've done 98 Rod Laver arenas? John Farnham. I mean, no one. I mean, Pink banging on about her 30 shows. Hey, darling. You got a long way to go yet.
Yeah.
The old man here. We've done 3 times your numbers, and that's, you know. But so no, that was a grave error on my behalf that we sort of carried over into the cap cities as, you know, the last time. Oh, what was I thinking? Anyway,
it's a good little gimmick old Farnsy's got now because no one really expects it to be the last time, but they'll go anyway. No, I mean, the next time, when it really is the last time, they're all going to go, yeah, right. The boy who cried wolf.
Yeah, bullshit. We've heard that before.
So what are you up to nowadays? I mean, we mentioned it off mic as well. There was a little break in your career.
Yes. Look, I'm doing quite a bit, actually, but I'm still involved in radio. I've got a couple of beautiful little FMers on the Sunshine Coast, CFM and Mix FM, that I, oddly enough, bought from Austereo, who bought me out of the Triple M's, but they sort of had to sell because these 2 stations bleed into Brisbane, and because my Triple M's are still there, you can only own 2 stations per market. Right. So Austereo had to sell something. They weren't going to sell me back Triple M in Brisbane, so they sold me the 2 Sunshine Coast stations, which I love. I'm very proud of them, and it keeps me involved in radio, and I love radio. I just love radio. It's just part of my DNA somehow. But that's keeping me busy. Farnham's going to keep me busy. We've still got a big monster tour that I'm trying to do, but I can't confirm because of COVID, and we've put it back 3 times now. At the moment, don't have a starting date. I may have to be. I mean, we were going to reduce something in October, November, but you know what? The border's closed and everything. I can't confirm it. So maybe early next year, or maybe mid next year. I don't know, but. COVID has decimated our business. There's no doubt about it, and it's difficult for us to get started again.
I mean, it's interesting listening to your career and all the, you know, never once would have had to imagine in the 80s a hurdle like COVID-19. Do you kind of you feel like it's a baptism of fire for young people getting into this industry now? Just they get to see everything that can go wrong up front. Yes,
COVID has really hurt us. There's no doubt about it, and. I mean, there are some people going out, but I mean, the American tours, they're not going to happen. Yeah. You have to come out here and quarantine for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
They're not going to do that. I mean,
you hear stories of American, particularly the rappers, are thinking of they think that they find out almost at the gate that there's this 2-week quarantine thing in a hotel.
Yeah. That wasn't in the brochure.
Yeah, I know. It's a nightmare.
Oh God. No, look, I mean, I feel for Paul Daly. I mean, what's he going to do with Guns N' Roses? I mean, you put Guns N' Roses in a hotel for 2 weeks, they'll fucking burn it to the ground. You're serious? I can't see it happening, unfortunately. I mean, those sort of things it's too hard. I mean, you put Axl Rose in a hotel for 2 weeks with the rest of the band and lock them up. Gee.
So you I guess you got to see, as you were saying, it was the 80s, you could almost do anything. You didn't have COVID-19. You didn't have all these restrictions. You didn't have noise complaints for many of the inner city venues.
No, we got away with murder in those days, mate. But I mean, it was sort of it was exciting because I I bought 2 Triple M for $90 million.
Yeah.
Hello? I didn't have $19 million. But I did. I found it. And in the end, I'm getting the banks calling me saying, Glenn, why didn't you come to me? I'm going, I'll come to you next time. I mean, they were throwing money at everybody. I mean, it was so easy to get. But that was the 80s. God, I miss the 80s.
Can you tell me some of the some of the interesting units. You said before you did business with Skase. Was there, in the midst of all of this, there was a lot of cowboys. It sounds like you were living pretty close to that life, but at the end of the day, you were still being pretty open and upfront with the banks.
Mate, I'm sure a lot of people thought I was the original cowboy. I mean, this rock and roller with hair down to his shoulders, long blonde hair. What? And you want how much? 90 million? I mean, to buy a what? A radio station? I mean, but I did. I found it, and you know what? They still stacked up. All these acquisitions are both based on multiples of earnings, and it's a simple equation at the end of the day. And FM was making, why to pay $90 million? Because they were making $10 million a year profit.
Yeah,
it was a simple little, equation of 7 or 8 times multiple, and that equation still equates today. It's still in place today, but just different scales of revenues. That's all. But in those days, FM was just on fire, and so it was insane when I think about it. I mean, how the banks used to line up and beg me to have them give me money. I mean, think about it. Like me, that's unbelievable.
I mean, it sounds like you were lucky you didn't get involved in the White Shoe Brigade and start building a few high rises on the Gold Coast, mate.
I dealt with them all. I mean, dealing with Christopher Skase was interesting. I mean, to say the least. I mean, he was tricky, and he played the art of brinkmanship all the time. I mean, I'd be having a meeting set up with him to try and buy FM 104, which I changed into Triple M in Brisbane. But FM 104 was the number one FM station at the time, and I'd bring all my financial people up for a meeting, and we get to the foyer of his marble palace office, and lap here, blue fucking marble, and they said, "Oh, Chris is not here." And I said, "But hang on, I just saw him. I just saw him at the back. He's here." No, he's not here. And I couldn't believe the games that he used to play.
So you knew what was going on?
And I'm sitting here with all my financial guys come up as well.
Where are you here? You're in Port Douglas or you're in
Brisbane? No, in Brisbane. But I ended up ended up being very close to Christopher, because I bought the first condo that he built in Sheraton Mirage. Yeah. I bought it as a slab on the ground, because I walked over this thing and thought, this is the best location. So I put my $10,000 lousy down deposit on this slab. He called me the next day and said, "That's mine." And I said, "Well, mate, your people have already copped my $10,000 deposit." And he said, "No, but that's the one I want." I said, "Well, you're building it. Why didn't you put your dibs in first?" Anyway, I said, "No, I've got it." So, and he said, "And I want the one next door to me for Farnham." And he said, "No, I'm taking that." So he quickly put his money down and stopped me giving the next door condo to Farnham. So Christopher Skase ended up becoming my neighbour, and I mean, and I have to say, we actually became quite good friends through all of this after I'd spent so much money buying his radio stations. But he made Farnham the head of the face of Channel 7 and all of that sort of stuff that he was doing, and Mirage. I mean, we were doing all these openings at Mirage, but it was, I mean, again, that was all the height of hubris, mate. I mean, I used to start to balance myself with, is this something Christopher Skase would do? Like fly commercial. No, he flies jets all the time, private jets. So for a while there, I'm flying around in private jets, because this is the sort of thing that Christopher Skase did. And that was when I knew I had lost the plot. I'm now basing myself on what Christopher Skase lifestyle was. Yeah. I mean, this guy used to fly up pork chops from Mario's, the butchers here in Melbourne, all the way to Port Douglas first class. Why? Because one couldn't buy a decent pork chop in Port Douglas. So what did he do? Fly him up first class. So did I get crazy? Yes, I got crazy. I mean, I had to take myself away and not become what Christopher Skase was, and the White Shoe Brigade. You're absolutely right. Okay.
Well, it all adds up to an amazing career now. You're outside of COVID. You're actually As you said, you're in Melbourne. You're safe for now.
Yeah, no, well, now Universal want to make me a chart act again. They've re-released my old Master's Apprentice's Choice Cuts album that I recorded in Abbey Road 50 years ago. 50 years to the month.
So that's what you're doing for now.
Universal want to make me a chart act again. Hang on.
Start it all again, back on stage, you reckon?
Yeah, I mean, I got a son who's trying to be a child actor. He's going to look at me and go, "Oh, come on, get off it, Dad." Jesus Christ, you're a bit round the bend now. I mean, 50 years this album's been out. But anyway, it actually still sounds okay. I mean, and it's released, I think, today.
Yep.
And Universal are quite excited about it, and they've got me doing the rounds now.
Yeah.
So here I am, trying to be a pop star again.
Yeah, no, we're glad to get you. It's 50 years since Masters Apprentices. So Choice Cuts. It was recorded in Abbey Road.
In Abbey Road. Yeah, and it was, that was the peak of my life. And I was like 22 in London, swinging 60s. I got to tell you, now that was a trip. I mean, I got to tell you, and for us, the smart asses to be, hey, we're recording at Abbey Road, the Beatles studio, bloody hell.
And did you get your own photo on the zebra crossing or what?
Oh, we did all of that. Of course you did. Who's going to be Paul? Who's going to be Ringo? Who's going to take the shoes off? Oh no, we did all of that. But it's actually a good album, and I'm actually quite proud of it. It's one of those things where I was very pleased to have had the experience of recording at Abbey Road. There's no doubt about that. That was exciting. I mean, that was incredible. So, and we had the same engineer, Jeff Emmerich, as the Beatles. So we're going, oh my God, this is good. But it was a good era and a good period of my life, and something I look back on with fond memories. And I'm very happy to see the old Choice Cups getting a second run on vinyl. Here we go again. It's just like the old days.
Did you find when you look back at the music that was like, even though you were head to toe in hostel beds, that was probably the least stressful kind of era of your career?
Yeah, look, we were fearless. You just life. I mean, it was different then, and I mean, in those days, you got your new single. You just take it straight to the radio station. You go down to see Stan Rofe, 9 o'clock at night, knock on the door, 3UZ. Stan will let you in, and here we are in the studio, and Stan's going, I'm going to play that record. Stan thinks this record's so nice, he's going to play it twice, and he played it again. I mean, it doesn't happen these days. You can't even get into the bloody radio stations, let alone be in there with the jocks in the studio at 9 o'clock at night, and playing your stuff live. It was a whole different world, and it was. We're all naive, but it was fun, and it was uncalculated. Now it's a serious business, and there's a formula that everyone has to work to, and it's all algorithms, and everything is sort of changed. I always sort of miss a little bit of the old days. I'm sounding my age now, but it was a gut feel business in those days. It's no longer, seems to me, to be a gut feel anymore. Yeah. It's all based on algorithms and numbers on commercial Facebook or that we didn't have in our day. I mean, I always used to joke. I used to be in the retail business. I remember with Little River Band, their last 2 albums in America, we shipped and sold 1 million albums on day one of Sleeper Catcher, 1 million copies of First Under the Wire on day one. We were, you know why? Because you're not streaming. You want a record, you're going to have to go and buy it.
Yeah.
And if you lived in America, you got to go drive 20 miles to your local Walmart to buy this record. And we were in the retail business. We're no longer in the retail business. We're in the streaming business, and it's a whole different world. And we've had to adapt. We've had to try and live with these new rules and just go with the flow here, because it's no longer selling units and widgets. We're streaming. this is all digital. It's a different, we're looking at numbers now, but not physical numbers that you can actually hold in your hand and sell.
That is, unless, of course, you are going to go and pick yourself up a vinyl copy
of the Choice Cuts, the Master's Apprentices, this is it, and make Wheatley a chart act again.
Bring him back. Thank you for joining us, Glenn. That was it was a hell of a yarn. It was a great little insight into an amazing career you've had, and all the best with the return to form, return to the charts.
Well, thank you, mate. And can I just say, I love the Betoota Advocates. I love you guys. I love your work. I don't miss a beat with what you guys do. So, and congratulations to you as well. You're doing well.
Thanks, mate. Well, maybe we'll link up down there at Beaconsfield Avenue, St Kilda, sometime.
Yeah. And you promised me your book.
Yeah. We'll send it to you.
Yeah, thank you. Yes.
Thanks, Glenn.
Thank you very much, Clarence. See you, mate.